this photograph, and from what we learned last class, what term is being referenced in this photograph? The assembly line, right? Now, if you all of a sudden have magically forgotten the activity that we did in last class, right? We created an assembly line to be able to move it through. I told you guys the record, right? I told you guys the record at the very end. 82? Yeah. Which you guys were so close to at like 35. So 45, excuse me. You were super duper close, okay? Now remember, with the assembly line that Henry Ford's going to create, what invention does the assembly line make a lot more productive? What is the actual object that they're trying to produce here?
The automobile.
Is the automobile or the cars, right? Now, in terms of production, does our amount of production go up or down with the assembly line?
It goes way up.
Goes way up. And then what about the quality, though? Goes way down, okay? So in terms of what's going on here, right, we have a ton of production, but our quality goes down. Do we have this happen in today's world? Yes, right? It's like when you go buy something and then you go back to your house, you're like super stoked about it, and guess what? It's broken, so you have to go return it, right? That tends to happen with things that are produced on this mass production assembly line. Now, the thing about this is that it is going to create a lot of conformity. And the problem with that conformity, let's put it away. The problem with this conformity is that everything is going to be exactly the same. There's no individuality in this. Now, for example, Henry Ford once said that you could have a Model T in any color as long as it's black, right? Because it's cheaper that way. If you make 100% of everything the same, it's going to be a lot cheaper. So think back to our Xbox controllers. What is the color, there's two of them, that pretty much every single Xbox controller has if you buy an Xbox? What color is it? Black and white. That's pretty much it. Although I was schooled on apparently the difference between Xbox S, X, and regular. So whatever. They come in black or white. If you get a controller or an Xbox that are different colors, so let's say like a Call of Duty Special Edition or whatever it could be, is that going to be more or less expensive than the traditional white and black controllers? More expensive, right? Because you're getting a special edition. So by creating everything the same, all of our prices are going to go down. Now, in terms of, remember this second industrial revolution, so make sure you remember that assembly line. That is in the key concepts specifically referencing the assembly line. So make sure you like star it or highlight it. You should have already done this last time. Just make sure that you remember it. Now, we go into a period that's known as the Gilded Age. This is a double star, very important term. Double star, very important term. Okay? I'm also going to give you the date range approximately. So the date's going to start at about 1880. Although historians are probably going to disagree with me, but, you know, whatever. Okay? 1880 to 1910, or 1920, excuse me, approximately, is the Gilded Age. Now, here's basically what happens with the Gilded Age, okay? This guy named Mark Twain, have you heard of Mark Twain before?
No.
Yes. Okay, if not, go to a library. He's kind of famous, okay? So, Mark Twain is an author, and he writes this book about what is known as the Gilded Age. Now, sometimes you get things where you ask for something and you don't get what you want. So, for example, in this case, this kid wants an iPad, and what does he get?
An iPad.
An I-pad. I mean, technically, he got what he wanted, right? Did he really get what he wanted, though?
Not really.
Not really, right? Or, for example, let's say that you ask your mom for these Oreos, because, like, you love Oreos, and then she comes back with the generic brand that, like, pretty much nobody, I know, right? Nobody likes that. You thought you were getting this, and you know what? If you love these, I don't judge you, okay? But Oreos are like the bomb.com. So what happens, though, is that over here, you get something that's not exactly what you were expecting. Well, that happens with this item. What item is this? Okay, well, all of our fancy geologists over here. Okay, fool's gold is like the common layman's terms. So this is fool's gold right here. So in the gold rush, which is in what year?
1849.
1849. Think of the 49ers. Good. So in 1849, though, people are finding fool's gold. And do they think it's real gold?
Sure.
Yeah. And they're like, wow, I'm going to be super rich. And they sell it for a ton of money. Well, the thing is that if you don't know with gold, when you find gold, you put it in a giant pot, you melt it down, and then you make it into whatever product you want in gold bars, coins, whatever. The thing is, though, is that with that gold, it's an element. So when you melt it down, is it going to become multiple elements? No, it shouldn't. If it's real gold, it should be one solid bar. Is fool's gold an element?
No.
Nope. So when they melt it down, what's going to happen? It's going to separate into like almost 70 different elements and minerals and things like that. And what happens is, just like when you guys did science class, where like you would put water and oil and things like that in, and remember how it separates? All of a sudden they realize, is fool's gold really gold? No, it's worthless. But it looks really shiny, right? And it looks expensive, but is it worth anything? No, but it was worth it to you guys when you find it, right, as little kids. So, you still have those memories, but monetary-wise, it's not really worth anything. Now, in terms of, yes?
Isn't gold just a shiny metal? So it's practically the same thing.
Okay, well now you're getting into a philosophy. You should go talk to Mr. Watts about that in TOK.
Why is gold so valuable?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you why. Gold is valuable because we put a value on it thousands of years ago, similar to bronze. We put a value on bronze, and all of a sudden bronze was expensive. Let me give you a really great example. Have you guys ever heard of a diamond?
Yes.
Are diamonds cheap or expensive? Expensive, right?
But they're not rare.
Well, they are getting rare. Okay. All right. Listen. Okay. So prior to about 1920, diamonds were absolutely worthless. Some people used them in their tools, but diamonds were they were all over the place in Africa. Nobody really cared about them. They were worth nothing. And in wedding rings, you actually, instead of the diamonds, you had like rubies and sapphires, gems. And that was what was worth things. Then, for your question of why does it worth something then all of a sudden, this one company came up with this branding. It was a slogan called "Diamonds Are Forever." That slogan launched diamonds into what it's known as today, and now pretty much everybody has diamonds. So yes, and if you want to, I would think Mr. Watts would love that question because he's such a philosophical guy, or maybe Mr. Kruger. But we put value on things that the society puts value on. Okay. Anyways, okay, listen. Okay, so what are these? Gold medals, and where do you earn these? The Olympics, which, by the way, Utah was just selected as the USOC's candidate city for the 2030 Winter Olympics. So Olympics might be coming back. It is a pretty close race with one other country, so we'll see what happens. But anyways, Kazakhstan. Hey, listen, in all seriousness, though, they're looking for diversity. Kazakhstan's never hosted it, and it would be a really big deal for that area. However, massive human rights issues. So who knows what's going to happen. But anyways, with these... Hey, guys. Okay, so with these gold medals, though, what happens after somebody wins a gold medal and they go to take a photo? What do they sometimes do with that gold medal? They don't lick it. They bite it. Okay? Now, when they go to bite this medal, okay, the real reason, does anybody know why they bite it? Raising their hand, since this class apparently likes to talk. Alex.
Isn't gold like a fairly soft metal?
Yeah, so what happens when you bite into it?
It leaves a dent.
It leaves the dents or the teeth marks, right? So originally, that was the point of this. The original gold medals were true gold, and when you bite into it, you could actually leave teeth marks in the gold. Now, the reality is, though, gold is really expensive. If you were to have a gold medal, just the gold alone would cost almost $1,200 a gold medal. And if you think about it, the amount of gold medals that is handed out is almost 400 gold medals. That's a lot of money. So instead, what they do is they are going to plate it in gold. Similar to how we used to have our gold dollars. Our original gold dollars were actually made of real gold, but that gold was worth $5. So you had a $1 piece that was actually costing $5 to make. It didn't make economical sense. So now what we do with our gold medals and what we do with these right here is we plate them. And we basically do what's called gilding them. Now what happens with gilding is where you take an item that's not worth as much as gold, and you either gold leaf it, gold plate it, whatever you do, and it just puts a small layer of gold onto it. Now this makes it worth more and makes it shiny and beautiful because, again, we perceive gold as a very rich thing. That's why iPhones were created in gold, is so they could sell better in China. Now, let's think about Miss Ray's wedding ring. It's a good example. It's white gold, which is technically fake gold, but we're going to ignore that, okay? Because white gold is not natural in the environment, but whatever, it's cheap. So with white gold, though, one thing about this is if my ring was 100% real gold, like real from the ground or whatever gold, my ring would be almost $25,000. Therefore, is it real gold?
Probably.
No, because I'm a teacher. So instead, it's plated. So you have this other substance inside, and then it's plated over the top. It still looks pretty and shiny, but it's actually being what's called gilded. Yes?
Why is it on a flower?
Because it's pretty for the wedding pictures.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
When you go to get married, you're going to realize, that's what my husband says. He's like, I just had to do a bunch of pictures because you wanted it. So I got what I wanted. Now, what happens in the 1800s is people want their environment to look richer than what it actually is. So all of this right here are all the different ornaments and things like that in their buildings. They wanted to look pretty, so they did the gold plating and the gold leafing. Is this actually 100% real gold? No. But it becomes really, really expensive by the looks of it. Now, what happens with the Gilded Age is that during the Gilded Age, they are going to gild society. So on your paper, what you need to be able to highlight, first off, make sure again that you've double starred it. Make sure you highlighted Mark Twain so that you know that he was the one who's going to coin this term. And then if you will highlight in the second bullet, period was glittering on the surface but corrupt underneath. Basically what that means is this. During the Gilded Age, people think we have a ton of money. We're really cool. We have all these inventions, all this great stuff, but inside it's corrupt. Now, you guys did your industrial assignment, hopefully, and you learned that some of these people seem really, really great on the outside, right? All these cool things that they're doing, helping people, making all this money, but underneath, they're corrupt or something bad is happening. That's what the Gilded Age basically is. Now, in terms of who's going to do this, these are going to be our monopolies. Go ahead and star this term as well. Now, with Monopolies, who has ever played the game Monopoly? Raise your hand. Keep your hand raised if you finished a game of Monopoly. Wow, look at you impressive gamers. Okay. Now, by the way, the average game is 4 hours long, so if you have 4 hours, you can go play it. Now, in the game Monopoly, when you are the winner, the end goal is to do what? It is to own everything, bankroll everybody, own the entire property. So what do you think a monopoly is going to do?
The same thing.
Same thing. Own everything, right? So what you need to highlight for this, if you'll do owns all parts of the industry or business. Owns all parts of the industry or business. Now, the word trust, make sure you highlight, underline, circle the word trust. Trust is the formal name that they're going to call themselves. So the Standard Oil Trust, the Carnegie Steel Trust. Those are all going to be the fancy names for these monopolies. Now, in terms of today's world, want you to think of a nice, juicy burger, okay? Which hopefully shouldn't make any of you hungry because you all just had lunch. Now, when you go to a burger joint, you have all these different options that you can be able to go to for your burgers. Now, all of these are separate companies competing for your money. So they're going to give like discounts, right? So you have like the Wendy's 4 for $4, McDonald's has a $1 menu, trying to compete for you to come to their business. Well, what happens if one company buys every single one of the burger joints in the United States? Are they going to want to compete against each other to keep prices down? No, because what's the point? There's nobody to compete against. If they're owned by the same person, why would you want to lower your prices? So what's going to happen to the price of burgers in the United States? It's going to go up. This would have been an example of what is called a monopoly, where they monopolize the burger industry. Now, when you guys did your assignment, you noticed that there were 5 major industries, right? Those 5 major industries are all going to be monopolies, where 95% of the marketplace is owned by just those 5 people. Now, another example is going to be gas. Now, one thing I want to point out is that we'll talk about like legal and illegal monopolies. All of the gas companies that you see on this picture are actually owned by the same company. So if you're going over to Chevron being like, ooh, I'm going to go be mean to Shell and go to Chevron, you're still giving the money to the same exact corporation, right? Now, this is all an attempt to be able to get control of the marketplace But there is a certain point where it can become illegal. Now, some monopolies are not illegal. An example of this is your utility companies. The reason why is because back in the 1800s, 1900s, a bunch of laws were passed saying you can't monopolize a natural resource. That's why, if you don't know, when you go to a restaurant or a food place, they can't charge you for water. They can charge you for the cup. So if you do get charged for water, you're getting charged for the cup, but you can't charge for water because of these laws.
That's why I always ask them to pour it into my mouth.
I really hope you don't actually ask them to pour it into your mouth. So what happens is that in this case, they don't want people competing with those natural resources, so they say everything must be the same. However, they do have limits. So they can't just charge exorbitant prices. The government sets limits on how much you can charge. Now, by 1900, 4/5 of the industry are controlled by these giant monopolies. And at the top of these monopolies are your CEOs. These are going to be your people that are going to be those people, just like you guys learned, that are going to have all the money. So you can see right here, you have the monopoly, and this person is fat with what? Money, 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 right? And if you see in pictures like this, so you see this is the raft of business. Up here, who are these guys? Your CEOs. In this term, it's industrialists. So you're having your Vanderbilts, your Rockefellers, things like that. And what are they sitting on, does it look like? And what are they fat with? Money, money, money. And on here, where the actual jobs are being done, who's actually supporting the company? The workers. Are they getting any money? Nope, not at all. Who's sitting up here all fine? It's the industrialists, the CEOs, right? Now, in terms of what this means, all of these begin to have this perception that these owners, these CEOs, are the bad guys. They're the guys that are going to take your money, and they don't care what happens to you. So you can see right here, all these workers working hard, giving money to the big, fat industrialists. Now, in terms of today's word with monopolies, there is a point where it is illegal to monopolize. So, for example, a couple months ago, the Walt Disney Company bought Fox out for, I think it was $71 billion. That had to go through the U.S. Department of Justice to even approve it. A couple years ago, hi.
Hello.
Thank you. Theodora. Wait. Well, you keep moving.
Sorry,
I look over here and I get confused. So with this deal, it had to get approved. But a couple of years ago, AT&T actually wanted to buy T-Mobile. They wanted to become a bigger company. The U.S. Justice Department said, no, that would monopolize the industry, and they declined it. They actually said they couldn't buy it, and they stayed two separate companies. So just because you have the money doesn't mean you can buy it. They have to make sure that it's legal. Now, with the Disney company, they actually have a lot more than you might think. All these companies that are right here are all owned by the Walt Disney Company. So ESPN, ABC, all of those are owned by the Walt Disney Company. For example, next time you go to the History Channel, that's owned by Disney. Okay? Now, you can buy all these different things, but at a certain point, they have to make sure you don't monopolize. So, for example, if they go, let's say that they go to buy like Universal, they would own over 50% of the marketplace for television and movies. They don't want that to happen, and it would probably be declined. So you have to be really careful. The one with Fox actually had to be adjusted because they said it was too much of a monopoly, but they did end up buying them. Now we get to what is known as the robber barons. Okay, now this is another star term. I know we have a ton of stars at the beginning. It's another star term. And if you will highlight on the robber barons, they exploit wealth. Highlight, they exploit wealth. Now, robber barons are going to be the people that are going to do everything that they can to make sure that they win, they get a ton of money, but what's going to happen to the workers? They're left behind, right? All it's about is making money, money, money. It doesn't matter who you burn, as long as you make a ton of money. So, for example, last week, GM, which is an American-made company, decided that they were going to close 15% of their workforce in the United States, and they were going to move them to another country. Globalizing, right? People saw this as taking people's money away, taking away jobs. Is this an example of that robber baron where they're just trying to make more and more money by globalizing instead of allowing people in America to have a job? Now, anybody ever watch this show, Undercover Boss? A couple of people. That's it?
I saw the cutscene. Yeah.
That is funny, but just in case you didn't know, that was actually a parody. That wasn't a real episode. I know. Also, Kylo Ren is not a real person. I know. It was a hard day at school today. I know. Now, with Undercover Boss, the entire reason that this came out is because of a period of time known as the recession. Basically, what happened is that back in 2008 and through 2010, our economy plummeted in the United States. Some of you might have been affected by that, where your parents, somebody you know, lost a job, people lost their houses, things like that. But what happened is that while everybody was suffering, losing their jobs, all the CEOs were making a ton of money. And what people started to say is, why are these guys making money, these bosses, when we're all suffering? For example, you guys know Toys R Us, rest in peace, okay? Toys R Us, when they went bankrupt, they had to pay out their CEO in that bankruptcy something like $40 million. So even though people lost their jobs in this entire company, the CEO made all this money. Well, what happened is that people started to protest. They had this thing called Occupy Wall Street, where basically what happened is during this Occupy movement, they sat at Wall Street and they said, why are these CEOs making all this money when the little guy is actually suffering? You doing okay over there, by the way? Yeah. You sure? Okay. You look a bit tired. Yeah. Okay. So let's give you a real life example. Okay. We are going to sell Xboxes or Xboxin or Xboxi, whatever the plural is. You are going to sell an Xbox, and we're going to pretend that it costs $100 to produce this Xbox. So you had to sell it for a profit, but this is how much you buy it from the Microsoft company. So with this knowledge, let's pretend that you have this super cute little family. Aw. Yeah, this is where the sign goes, aw. Aw, thank you. Okay, so, yeah, Marky Mark. Now let's pretend that this cute little family decides to make a gaming store here in Salt Lake. They're going to call it the Best Game Store. And they are going to sell the entire supply of Xboxin, however the plural sounds, to Salt Lake City for $300. Now, we all know that Xbox is life, which means that everybody wants this product. And so everybody's going every single day and buying this. Now, unfortunately, with all the good guys in the industry, you have to have the bad guys who are robber barons. Now, guys, don't be scared. These are fake pictures, okay? Just don't be scared. These aren't real people. Now, let's pretend that our robber barons, who we all know are the most evil people on the planet, and they decide this cute family that just wants to survive in the world and have a home and eat, they're going to make a new store called the Awesome Sauce Gaming Company. And they decide, well, I'm going to go and undercut this because I want to be the only one in the industry. So they come out with their Xbox, and they're going to sell it for $105. Now, how much money does that give them as a profit? $5. And after you pay everybody, are they really going to be making any money at all? No, in fact, they're all probably going to operate at a loss, right? Now, the thing is, though, is what is the benefit of this? Are you more likely, if both Xbox are the exact same product, are you as a consumer going to buy the Xbox for $300 or $105? $105. Ever heard of Black Friday? That's why people fight each other. Okay? So they're going to have this $105. So all of a sudden, everybody begins to buy this amount right here. And unfortunately, that causes this poor family, who again, just wanted a life of joy. Now they're starving because their company goes out of business. Now, if these guys, though, are now the only ones in the marketplace, what are they going to do to their cost of the item? Oh, they're going to jack it up. And they're going to move it up to $1,000 in Xbox. Okay? Now, the reality is, in this situation, let's pretend in this situation that Xbox truly is a life necessity where you have to have that product to survive. If you have no other choice and you have to spend this money, what's going to happen to the income and the profit of this company? It's going to be skyrocketing, right? Because everybody needs it. I don't know if you guys saw this in your research, because hopefully you did, because all the other two classes mentioned it already. But John D Rockefeller did the exact same thing. When he first started selling oil, which everybody needs at this time, when he starts selling oil, he sells it for so cheap that his family almost goes homeless, his home gets foreclosed, He skips meals where he was only eating one meal every 2 days in order to survive for about 7 months. But what did that do to all the other companies? Made him go out of business. And then he bought them. And then when he's the only one in the marketplace, what is he going to do to the price of oil? Jack it up and skyrocket. Do you guys see how they were able to make a ton of money at the time? Now, by the way, is this legal anymore?
No.
No. It becomes very illegal after the Gilded Age, which we'll talk about later. You can't do this anymore. Now,
What part of it is illegal?
what part of it is illegal? Because we have these things called consumer protection laws, which we will actually talk about right when we get back from the break. Basically, they want to make sure that you as a consumer are not being swindled. And so they'll put either what's called a price floor, which protects the price of an item, like agriculture and things like that. And they'll have price ceilings on things which say you can't charge more items for this, or you can actually be sued for it.
So even if you made like a monopoly, like it wouldn't.
You can't make a monopoly anymore because monopolies are illegal. So let me give you So, for example, the most common monopoly that people are most concerned about are airlines. So back in the olden days of 2000, there were actually around 40 more airlines that were at the airport. And everything was a competition. Back in the olden days, everybody got a free meal. Everybody got free luggage. You didn't have to charge to pick a seat. There was maybe first class, but there was no select economy or anything like that. Those didn't exist. But what happened is, as companies became more profitable and they began buying different things, when these big companies, because now there's only really 6 or so big companies, well now, do you guys get free meals on airplanes? No. Not, unless you're those cool kids in first class. Okay? So, you don't get free meals. Do you typically, unless you're on Southwest, have to charge for luggage? Yes. So what happened is that as the competitors were reduced, competition doesn't exist anymore, and people begin to charge whatever they want. That's why they increase the prices. So the concern is...
That's why they always say thanks for choosing Delta.
Yeah, well, that's because that's a competition thing, yeah. So what happens, though, is that let's pretend that one airline buys all the companies. What's going to happen to your airline prices? They're going to skyrocket. There's a reason why SpaceX can charge $400,000 for one person to go one way to the space. It's because they are the only ones in the marketplace. Now, what happens with airline companies is that they ban those. You can't do that. So, for example, Delta attempted to buy American Airlines, and they were declined, saying it would monopolize the industry too much. So they were actually rejected for that. Now, they can buy foreign ones because, for example, United Airways owns Lufthansa and Air Canada and things like that. You can do those because those are foreign. But here in the United States, you can't monopolize it. So I don't think any companies are going to be buying any of these other big companies because they would monopolize it. It would get turned down by the U.S. government.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about a real-life example of a robber baron in terms of today's world. Now, I will tell you that if you have a differing opinion of whether or not they're a robber baron, I would love to hear it because I'm just letting you know, you can all have your own opinions. And I would love to be able to hear your explanation for him. So this is a guy named Martin Shkreli. Martin Shkreli, at 23 years old, took over his dad's pharmaceutical company. Now, when he took over this pharmaceutical company, they made this thing called Daraprim. And basically what happens with Daraprim is that Daraprim is a drug that is given to people with HIV and AIDS. It basically slows down the progression of symptoms of HIV and AIDS. The average person takes 2 pills twice a day. Now, prior to this, each of these pills was about $13, which was really great. Because what happened is that after insurance, it was cheaper, and you could be able to offset those symptoms of HIV and AIDS. Well, overnight, when he becomes CEO, the cost of every pill goes from $13 to $750 overnight. Does an insurance company want to pay that? Nope. So now they're not going to pay for insurance. So now, out of pocket, $750 plus $750, how much is that? Math, $1,500, okay? That means you're paying $1,500 per day to help your symptoms of HIV and AIDS, right? Now, the problem is he was the only one in the marketplace. No other drug has the ability to do this. So unfortunately, it's not illegal. But the U.S. government attempts to be able to sway him, and it has him go in front of U.S. Congress to kind of explain himself. Now, we're going to watch this video, which, shout out, you guys will see somebody comment here in Utah, if you know politics. But we're going to watch this video, and I want you to think, how does Martin Shkreli act that would imply that he is a robber baron. Theodore, would you mind shutting off the light for me? All right, so again, thinking to yourselves, how does Martin Shkreli act? Also, this has captions, just to let you know.
I want to ask you a few questions. What do you say to that single pregnant woman who might have AIDS, no income? She needs Daraprim in order to survive. Say to her when she has to make that choice. What do you say to her?
On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and respectfully decline to answer your question.
Guilty.
Oh, wait.
Wrong.
Wait till this one.
On the advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and respectfully decline to answer your question.
I'd like to yield time to Congressman Gowdy, South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it pronounced Shkreli?
Yes, sir.
See, there you can answer some questions. That one didn't incriminate you. I just want to make sure you understand you are welcome to answer questions, and not all of your answers are going to subject you to incrimination. You understand that, don't you?
I intend to follow the advice of my counsel, not yours.
Okay, so, again, everybody can have their own opinion on Martin Shkreli. Martin Shkreli does this, by the way, for 5 hours. So they constantly ask him questions. He never actually answered any question. The only question he answered is when they asked him, why are you doing this? He said, I'm just doing what any good businessman would do. I'm making money. That's the whole goal here. Now, following this incident, you can probably assume he's getting a little bit of hate from the Twitter world, right? So he gets into a nice little Twitter feud. Now, Martin Shkreli decides that he is going to kind of go into this thing. So it says at the top, I am outraged at your greed. Your greed will cost people their lives and bring people to financial ruin. He says, don't think so. You don't care, you're a millionaire, but there are middle-class people out there who will be in debt for decades just to pay. Ain't my fault. Okay? Now, the thing is about this is, unfortunately, because Daraprim was so unique, so individual, you can make it however much you want. For example, the very first iPhone, back in the day, that only had like stock apps and can only connect to Wi-Fi, it wasn't really a phone, really. That phone was $1,200 after discount because they were the only smartphone in the marketplace. Now, what happens, though, is during this investigation, they start to go through his financial records. Turns out Martin Shkreli stole something like $20 million from his company. And so he ends up going to jail for the $20 million stealing. So he is in jail for 25 years in federal prison. So he did go to jail, just not for this. Now let me give you another example that some of you might be a little bit more close to. Yeah.
Did the medicine go back to a normal price?
Yeah, so what happened is, so this is where it gets really weird, and this has to do with owning companies. So if you own at least 50% of the company, as in 50.0001%, you own that company. The same thing happens all the time nowadays, is that's what they try to do, is a controlling part of the company. When a CEO owns that, which is what happened here, even though he went to jail, technically they cannot fire him because he owns the company. He owns the majority stake. What happened is that, and if you've ever seen Batman, where they, he's the CEO, but they put in like an advisory board, that's what happens here. So basically, he is still the CEO. He's never been ousted because he owns the company. However, what happened is they froze his assets, which means he doesn't receive any money from the company, and then the advisory board is actually what took over it. So he doesn't control it anymore. He owns it, but it's more like he owns it and doesn't receive any benefits from it. Oh, and they also took something like $30 million from his bank account and basically took all of his houses and stuff. So he doesn't really have much to come to when he leaves. Also, people don't like him. But he still has a Twitter,
I wonder why.
so you guys can go watch his Twitter and
Can
go...
we tweet from jail?
You can actually tweet from jail.
Sick.
Yeah. It depends. So what happens is that you can buy privileges, and depending on the severity of your crime, they can allow you to continue to tweet and stuff like that, or Instagram from jail. Why do you think Lil Wayne was able to create an entire album when he was in jail during that time?
Who?
Lil Wayne.
Oh, yeah.
So, is he not real anymore? Is he not like a thing anymore?
No, he is.
Okay.
That was like Lollipop in like 2000.
That was not his last song. I know of other songs. Lollipop came out like when I was like only in second grade. So, all right. Anyways, let me give you another example that some of you might have a little bit better of a relation to. Let's talk about the Epipen. Now, if you have a severe allergic reaction, okay, you need an Epipen. Epinephrine, basically what it does is it injects you with this thing that basically allows your, one of the first things that happens in an allergic reaction is your esophagus begins to close on itself. This basically allows those muscles to relax so it opens it back up. Without epinephrine, some people would legitimately die. We have a teacher here in the building that is so allergic to peanuts. If that person were exposed to it whatsoever, he would probably die in about 5 minutes. That's how allergic that person is. Now, the average person with an EpiPen has 3 sets. One at home, one at school or work, and one in the car, because you never know when an allergic reaction can happen. If you don't do EpiPens within about 5 minutes of the actual allergy coming out, you could easily die. And the average person has to do both, because why not double dose? A lot of people, one, will not fully stop the effects. It's not a permanent solve, but it'll get you to the hospital. Now, a 2-pack of these a couple years ago was about $250. They expire every 3 years, so pretty much every 3 years, you're having them replaced for about $800. Yes?
Although they still do work. Don't quote me on that.
Yes.
I mean, don't do that. But if money's like an issue, they still work.
Yeah.
I've used that with my brother before.
Yeah. But it is not advised because all medicine expires. So no comment, because I have to teach that medicine expires and be healthy and safe. Okay, so what happens though is that pretty much about every 3 years, you're spending $800 to replenish the supply. Well, the problem is that epinephrine has been the only one in the marketplace for so long. A couple years ago, EpiPen felt like, you know what? We're a company, we're in it to make money, and overnight, the cost of those EpiPens increased by 500%. Now, this means that overall, the price of the EpiPen goes up to about $1,000 for a 2-pack. That $1,000, that's $3,000 every 3 years, and most of the time insurance only takes away about $100, $50 to $100 of that, so you're paying for that constantly. Now, when they asked them and they said, why are you doing this? They're like, we're just another company, right? We're the only one in the marketplace. We have the ability to make money from this. Well, what happens is that people are unable to spend this kind of money. They're worried that they're going to die, which is a very legitimate concern. And so what happens is that CVS comes out with a new product, which is the very first generic EpiPen. You can buy a single dose for $50. That $50, you typically can get a coupon from your health insurance that makes it free. You have to replace it every year, but it is only $50. Now, when this generic comes out and you have a new competitor in the marketplace, what happens to the cost of the EpiPen? Goes down because you have more competitors in the marketplace. So this was like the anti-monopoly, right? Now, what happens because of this is EpiPen ends up having to bring their cost down. I believe it's a 2-pack for around $400 because now they have to compete against CVS, creating their own generic product. Now, I want to give you one more example. And this one, if you know the ending, don't say it because I like to be the one that knows everything. Okay? So, has to do with these two right here. What happens is that this lady and her boyfriend are driving home and they stop for gas. Problem is, when they go to pull out their wallet's gone. They lost it. They have no way to get home. They didn't have cell phones on them, so they have nobody to call. And they're out of gas at a gas station out in the middle of nowhere. This homeless guy here on the right comes up to him, asks them if they are okay. And they say, well, we lost our wallet. We don't have any money. He takes his last $20 from his wallet, gives it to the couple to be able to get gas. She takes this photo, which it appears it was taken from a potato, but this photo is taken. It's put online, and it goes absolutely viral. She starts a GoFundMe, and in only 3 weeks, they make $450,000 for this homeless guy. Now, he was homeless, addicted to drugs, in and out of jail. They were able to pay off all of his jail fines and restitution. They bought him a house. They bought him a car. They set up the ability that he would receive funds for the next several years in order to get back on his feet. A really happy story. Well, that wasn't until September. So this is like 9 months after this happens. You see, what happened is that house that they gave him was a trailer house that they put on these two's family's farm. And because it's on their family farm, when they don't want him anymore, guess what they just have to do? They evict him. Say he can't live here anymore. And they sell the mobile house, and now he's homeless again. But he has his car, right? Problem is that car was a 90s car, really old with about 200,000 miles on it, breaks down a month after they give it to him, and now he doesn't have a car anymore. Oh, and by the way, that car was bought in their name, so they technically own it, and they sell it for parts and keep the money. And then they start to look into their Instagram and start to look into what they're doing in their spare time. And magically, they got brand new BMWs in their driveway. Which, by the way, both of these made at their jobs. One made $40,000 at their job, and one made $60,000. That's not enough to buy a BMW. Then they're taking private flights and jets to go back and forth to Las Vegas. So what happens is back in September, the homeless guy files a lawsuit against them, saying that they want all the money. At this time, he'd only received about $150,000. He wanted the rest of the $450,000 that they owed him. Turns out that when they go to get in front of the judge, they admit that that rest of that money is gone. Turns out that all that money that was supposed to be in this magical savings account had all been spent by this couple. So they start to investigate them. They take their BMW and things like that. If you don't know, on GoFundMe, there's actually a rule that says all the money must go to the person that the GoFundMe is for. So GoFundMe gives him in cash $450,000, and all is well, right? Well, no. That's where things really change. You see, 2 weeks ago, on the week of Thanksgiving, this happens. Turns out it was all fake. That event at the gas station never even happened. Turns out that these two had a gambling problem. They were really, really short on cash. One night, they lost $8,000 in a single night. They were walking out of the casino when they saw this guy that they knew had been homeless and had seen him around. They go up to him and be like, hey, you want to do this plot with us where we make up this fake event, get all this money, and then we'll split it 3 ways? He says, sure, and they do it. So that $450,000 for this guy that was homeless didn't actually happen. Oh, by the way, the assignment that you picked up today is due next class. Okay? So what happens is, this entire story was fake. Basically, how they were able to figure it out is he didn't realize that when he sues somebody, they will go and investigate that. And when they investigated it, they found all these text messages where they admitted that they were all lying about this. And it turns out it was an entirely fake story. So this would be an example of a robber baron. Okay? Now, on the other side, you have the captains of industry, which is a starred term. Starred term. And the captains of industry are going to be our people that they are the exact opposite of this. So basically, this very first bullet is what you need to highlight on your paper. You need to know that your captains of industry, instead of exploiting the wealth, they create the wealth. Basically, they say that while I'm making a ton of money, I'm going to help you out, whether you're a worker, a common person, a consumer. I'm going to help you as an individual. Now, for this modern day example, we're going to think about this guy, Mark Zuckerberg. What does Mark Zuckerberg own? Facebook, which I've heard is like for old people, which I disagree with because I'm not that much older than you and I have a Facebook. But regardless though, Mark Zuckerberg makes old person social media, okay? And he creates Facebook. Well, he wanted to be a captain of industry. He wanted to change the world. So for example, he is going to create this, which basically what this right here is this was a safety check. So let's pretend that an emergency happens. An earthquake, a natural disaster, a shooting. What happens is your phone automatically registers that there's a disaster happening. It puts this on your phone and it alerts you immediately so that you can go in. You press I'm safe, or either that, I'm not in the area, or maybe you're not actually safe. And what happens is it alerts every single person on your friend group that you are okay. In terms of where this would be important, I used to work at Disney. I have a lot of friends that still work at Disney and live in Florida. When the Pulse nightclub shooting happened, I actually had 6 friends from Disney that were at that nightclub the night of the shooting. So I wake up and I have all of these things that say I'm safe, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, so that I knew that they were all right and not killed in the shooting. Now, the benefit of this, by the way, is it does work only on Wi-Fi, which means that it doesn't bog the lines down. That's the whole point of this. They don't want 911 call centers to crash because too many people are calling their family members to make sure that they're okay. That's the point of it. You also could do this fancy little donate button. So on your birthday, it can remind people all the time to donate to your cause. I get these all the time every single day. But another cool thing they have is what is known as the Aquila. Basically what this is providing free Wi-Fi to people in third world countries. So basically how it works, this is an unmanned craft. It's powered by solar energy. When it goes into the air, it can pick up a signal from about 300 miles away from a large industrial center that is emitting a Wi-Fi signal. When it goes up to this, it takes that Wi-Fi signal and triangulates it and makes this entire grid of about 400 to 500 miles at the bottom. And as it flies back and forth, anybody in that grid receives free Wi-Fi until that spacecraft or that aircraft has to come down. This has provided free Wi-Fi to 9 million people in Africa. They're now planning to expand it. The next one is India, is what they're trying to expand it into. Now, they also, last year, along with his wife, decided to donate 99% of their wealth, which is the equivalent of $45 billion. So they've donated all of this money, right? So it sounds like captain of industry, awesome. Well, with every person who's a captain of industry, there's got to be something negative. Just like you guys, when you did your research, you saw that there were people who did really awesome things and really awful things at the same time. So, for example, with Mark Zuckerberg, a couple years ago, there were these personality quizzes, and they're all over the place on Facebook. If you've ever been on Facebook, there's always that person that answers every single, like, what dog are you quiz or whatever it could be, right? So in these ones, this is the personality. Are you extroverted, introverted? What's your big 5 personality or whatever, right? When you got to the end of this survey, it also said, oh, by the way, bonus question, who are you voting for in the 2016 election? And everyone's like, oh, well, I want to know what my personality is. Click who I'm voting for and move on. Well, it turns out this company in England was taking this data and analyzing it to figure out who you were going to vote for based on your demographics. Well, what happened is that they stole this information from about 56 million Americans. And people had no idea that this research firm in England was doing all this study. Ended up with Mark Zuckerberg. Facebook got banned in a couple countries. They had to change the entire EU system of how the internet is run. A lot of people in the United States wanted Facebook shut down because of this incident. So is he a captain or is he a robber baron? Now, if you'll look at your homework for tonight, so pull that out. And if you'll go to the side that has the cartoons on it, please. Now, here's what you're going to do. This side is relatively easy. You have 2 political cartoons about industrialists, monopolies, things like that. Your job is to analyze it and answer the questions below. You'll notice in these that there are a lot of common symbols, people, names that you've heard of. That will help you in figuring out how to do this. Now, if you flip this over to the other page, this is the really important page. Now, one thing I want you to notice about this assignment, what does it say at the very top? 2006 free response questions. Why that's important? If you're ever like, what is the AP exam going to look like? This was one of the word-for-word questions, just like your immigration one on the test the other day. This is the exact word-for-word from the AP exam. If you can answer this question and you get a 3 on this homework assignment, you would have gotten a 3 on the AP exam. So that's why this one is so important. Now, this is a new type of SAQ that we have not seen yet. Basically, what this does is it takes 2 historians. One is going to say that the industrialists during this time were robber barons, and one is going to say that they were captains of industry. You have to support your argument on those. So, for example, if you decide Rockefeller was a robber baron, that's what you say, and you say this is why he was a robber baron. If you're going to say Carnegie was a captain of industry, then that's what you say. So letter A says, showing the difference between the historians, that's easy. One says, and you reference who, says that they are captains of industry. One says that they're robber barons. Then you do one letter explaining how they are captains of industry, one that says robber barons. Now, if you want to do the same person for both and explain how Rockefeller was a captain and a robber baron, that's fine, as long as you can support your claims. If every single person in this room says Rockefeller is a robber baron except one, that is okay as long as you can support your claims. That's all that matters. Okay? Due next class period. So right on there. Due next class period. Yeah.
How long should each question be?
Just like the regular SAQs. So it should be between 3 and 5 sentences per letter.
So use another page?
Yeah, I would be using another page. I don't think you're going to fit it on that page. Okay, wait, we're not done yet. We still have 7 minutes left in class. So don't put your stuff away. Some of you already put like 100% of your stuff away before we even explain the assignment. Okay? Now, when you go to look at these industrialists of what the difference is between these two, captains of industry and robber barons, we can think of this exact same thing in today's world. So, for example, have you guys ever heard of an industry called Amazon? No? If not, go and watch the commercials. They're like these creepy boxes singing right now on TV. Yeah, it's a really weird commercial. Now, the CEO of this company makes a ton of money. And in fact, just last week, this was last Thursday, he donated $2.5 million to a homeless shelter. That's a really big deal, right? Captains of industry. But as you know, if you've ever read Donald Trump's many tweets, you would know that he hates Amazon, and especially Amazon's CEO. He sees Amazon's CEO as a robber baron. Now, why this could be as many different reasons. But for example, it's not going to be as silly as this was. So this is where a mom has asked the CEO to rename Alexa into a different one because her daughter keeps getting bullied. Now, it's not as silly as this, but yes.
It says the right to you as a father and human being. It says Alexa's mom, right?
Kate.
Oh, she's talking to Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, he's saying like you're a father and a human being. Yeah. Okay, I know it is confusing. I didn't look that far, I just found the headline. Now, what happens though is some other things. So for example, yes, you gave $2.5 million, but also somebody in England just came out with an article that said that all the human beings in Amazon are treated as robots working 20 plus hours a day. And then you have this one that says accidents at Amazon, workers left to suffer after warehouse injuries. Is Amazon's CEO a robber baron or a captain of industry? Now, well, it depends in your mind of what you think, okay? Now, on the other side, you have one more example. So this is going to happen. This was back in July. You might have heard of it. Back in July, there was a soccer team in Thailand who went hiking in a cave. Unfortunately, when they went hiking, a large storm came, and basically what happened is it flooded the cave. Well, they are right here, and it's the little yellow dot, and everything else becomes underwater. So they don't have a way to get out. It took them almost 15 days to actually find these people. Turns out that they were perfectly alive and healthy, but now they have a problem. How are you going to get this group of about 15 kids plus an adult coach out of this cave? Because you have a problem. There are 3 separate areas that are underwater. In order to scuba dive through all of those areas, it takes 5 hours. The average scuba dive tank is only an hour worth of oxygen. How are you going to get all the way over there when you don't have enough oxygen? Now what happens is that Tesla's CEO, Elon Musk, comes up with an idea. His engineers are able to create a submarine that can go underwater, go through the caves, and then make it over and save these kids and bring them out. Well, this sounds like a great idea. And he sends it over, sends his team over, they're going to save everybody. Well, here's the thing. They didn't end up using his submarine. And there's a couple of things that happen. First off, Twitter roasts him. Pretty bad. They say clearly this was just an advertisement for Tesla and for you, trying to make it seem like you were a really great guy. Then, the head of the rescue says that the entire thing was actually useless. The submarine was not small enough to be able to move in and out of those caves, and the submarine sits there completely unused, even though it costs about $28 million to create. And then, when the CEO, Elon Musk, hears this, he then calls out to that diver who said that this was not practical and calls him a child rapist on social media. Now, what happens is that Elon Musk, this ends up being a huge PR disaster for him. Because people started to say, like, it was this guy, the CEO, that thought, I'm going to help everybody. But it didn't actually end up working out. Now, again, is Elon Musk a good guy or a bad guy? That's totally up to you. He has made a whole bunch of impacts and things like that. Now, when we go to talk about these industrialists, such as John D. Rockefeller, incredibly enough, we still have 5 minutes left in class. Wow. Yeah, I know. Some of you are frustrating me, especially. Okay? It's not just you, but it is the whole class. I do hope that you guys are being respectful. Remember, we don't want to be like those other classes that I have to talk to because of behavior. Okay? I just want to point out, one of your students said, I never send messages over Remind about your class. That could change. Yeah. Okay? Don't be an example for other classes of what you shouldn't do. So, John D. Rockefeller. You guys should all know who he is. What is his industry?
Oil.
Oil. Make sure on your notes that you go ahead and highlight that, star it, make sure that you know it's oil, that he is going to be an oil person. And I know we're skipping down to Rockefeller, but it's because I want to talk about like the exciting ones first. Okay? So, with John D. Rockefeller, he is going to be in oil. And in his oil industry, he creates what's known as the Standard Oil Trust. If you will highlight that term, there are two names of the trust that you must know. One is Carnegie Steel, and one is the Standard Oil Trust. Those are the two that you need to know. So he creates this monopoly of oil that he owns 95%. And I just want to make sure if you don't have your notes out, this is going to be on the test. Okay? So what happens is that during this time, if you want to relate it to today, all of these were his original Standard Oil companies. Over here on the right, those are the modern day names for all those oil companies. So if you ever go to Chevron, you can go and thank Rockefeller because he owns that. Okay? Now, what happens is, please do not distract other students who are trying to pay attention if you're not. So what happens is that John D. Rockefeller becomes so famous that he is going to end up becoming the world's very first billionaire. When he retires at the age of 74, he's worth about $318 billion. If you want to compare that to today's world, okay, think in your head the number 3 and put 26 zeros behind it. That is how wealthy he was. In fact, John D. Rockefeller is considered the richest man that has ever lived in terms if you relate everything to inflation and different things like that. And he trumps the second placer by a lot. In fact, the 3 most richest people in world history are on your guys' sheet. Now, what happens is that he also does a lot of good. For example, he gives away $500 million. That's like $40 billion in today's world. I know some of you guys have expressed interest in Rockefeller University or the University of Chicago. Those are both founded by Rockefeller with his money. One other thing that he does, though, is he's going to eradicate a thing called hookworm with his money. Now, hookworms are anywhere between 1 foot and 3 feet long. If you have a foot thing or a gross thing, I would look away at this time. So if you don't like looking at feet or you don't like gross pictures, just look away. What happens with hookworms is they burrow underneath your skin, and they eat off of your flesh and your muscle. Well, what happens is that this worm right here, which is about 3 feet long, sits and lives underneath your skin. They burrow and eat all of your skin and your muscle, and they survive there until they are literally pulled out. With Rockefeller's wealth, he ends up having a vaccine created for hookworm, gives it for free across the United States, and completely eradicates hookworm from the United States because of John D. Rockefeller. Now, all of these are those captain of industry kind of things. Next class, we're going to talk about why, though, he might be a robber baron. So, put this away.